Thank you, Dr. Moore. So one thing that I want to bring up is how many people actually play Tetris and been immersed on it? I'm not the only one. Okay, great. So I'm an assistant professor at Towson University, but I also am a grad student at Dr. Norman's lab there. So I study actually the visual aesthetic of the immersibility. And so part of this panel, Kirk and I decided everybody's talking about immersion. We want to talk about a little bit about the narrative part. So how does the narrative plays in this particular immersion? So we're going to start with the sequence of fiction and non-fiction storytelling. And Kirk will pitch in a little bit about that's kind of his territory. And we constantly argue about this particular idea of fiction versus non-fiction and whether that plays actually any role in immersion at all. And you guys can actually pitch in as well. I look at it as literally also from SCI perspective, as a play, as a theater, as working with a concept or event. I'm also an artist, visual artist, so I'm looking at that perspective also part of my work. And an interactive storytelling. So part of my work is mostly aesthetic experience of patterns and recognition. I look at it from a little bit of social science perspective. That is part of my work. And the concept of psychological experience process of memory was Sean and Noreen actually talked about a little more. So I'm going to just give it to Kirk for a few more, and then I'm going to talk about the visual aesthetic.
Yeah, so when I kind of think about immersion, there are basically, you've got storytelling and games that are more focused on narratives. Now, obviously a narrative is almost a synonym for sort of a story, but there is a real difference in the narrative mode of the story and the amount of control you have. So, in a game with a narrative, it's an idea of no two people are going to play through the same way. Like, I don't know, Skyrim, and GTA 4 even, and other sandbox games and other very open-ended things.
So the question is, the narrative storytelling, isn't an immersive experience? Do you really actually even need a narrative or storytelling? That's the sort of a controversy. We actually went back and forth on it and sort of kind of create an argument with the panel. I think, do we need a storytelling? Do you really actually have to have a story to actually be immersed in a game? How about a Pac-Man? What happens in the Pac-Man? What about Tetris, right? I mean, I can go in Tetris for like a whole day and forget eating. Even drinking water, I've done before, so I think that... and then the other aspect, you want to talk about this?
Oh, I was going to say, it's interesting because there are some who argue that story has nothing to do with immersion in video games at all. There are actually quite a few papers arguing that really the immersion is caused not by the player mashing buttons. That's just, almost coordination and memorization almost. So it's the idea of what exactly immerses the player, and that's different from person to person.
So the visual aesthetic experience, the part of what we do as a gamer, and I think that's sort of coming out of a gamer experience rather than the science experience. Well, we're going to look at it differently. For an example, Pac-Man. I mean, how many times do you play Pac-Man and Kirk and I actually went down there in the game room and almost sat there for hours without knowing the time just went by playing Pac-Man. Even though we're playing two players, it's back and forth, but we're actually watching as he was playing, I was watching, and I was playing while watching. I think there's also the idea that does the story really need to be there, right? Tetris, for an example. Really, Tetris does not even tell a story, but do I care? No. As a gamer, I just want to play that game. Who cares about the story? That's the idea. Go watch a film. And I think there's a lot of... there's been a lot of talk about the storytelling and the narrative and whether it's important or not in different panels, and I've heard about yesterday and the day before yesterday too as well. But the idea is, do we really need to tell storytelling? I teach game design classes, and so sometimes the students comes up, so I want to make a cool game. That's always an argument. It's like, what is a cool game? What does that mean, right? We never look at the functionality part of the game, and I think that's where the gamer's perspective is. Does the graphics need to be so cool that we almost lose the functionality of it? Mario Kart. How many people have been immersed in Mario Kart? Really? I mean, so does it really need a story? You know, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up a little bit with this is open-ended game. It's a gamer's perspective. Now it's sort of, we're moving into that direction as open-ended game in a large every single corporation and everybody is building these games in a larger aspect. So Grand Theft Auto as an example, it's like, man, do I need to follow that storyline? I just want to go and shoot. Drive that car fast as much as possible, you know, break some cars up, because I can't do it in the real world. I mean, really. So I can, right? So from a gamer's perspective, I think that's where the immersion comes in. And last but not the least, the board game, right? The Labyrinth. How many people actually been immersed playing this Labyrinth? Okay, I just bought it for my 4-year-old son. Believe me or not, I felt like I bought it actually for me. Because I play more than he does. And we really both play for hours. And he loves this game. And I figured out that if you have a wife actually who don't play game, you can actually make an excuse of buying games now. I figured out this. It's like, I'm buying for my son. It works. It really works. So that's the one example for it. So I'm going to give it to Kirk after this, and then if he has any points. And
yeah, my excuse for buying video games is that I use them in my lab for research. I put in this big order. Grand Theft Auto was on there, and one of the people involved in the accounting emailed me and said, Dr. Norman, I think we need a justification for the educational value of Grand Theft Auto. And I told my wife, well, I've got to have this system, and I've got to spend this money on these games to keep up with this stuff. With all my students doing it. She buys it. Right?
yeah.
She doesn't play it. But she has been addicted to Tetris.
I figured out actually, not only teaching game, I have to play the game while I teach how to build games. So I play constantly at home, and anytime it's 3 o'clock, my wife calls me and says, hey, it's time to go to bed. I'm like, I'm working! And it really works. It's like, when you call about the work, it's like, okay, it kind of calms down, right? But doesn't matter, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, it's like, I'm working!
So, I just wanted to show a couple, talk a little bit more, and show a couple more examples. Okay, so, like I was saying, there are a lot of games where really it's narrative-based. So, newspapers are narratives, any sort of telling of events. With the whole idea of sandbox games, Grand Theft Auto 4 again, like I was saying, where no two people are going to have the same experience. Even if you go through all the quests, you're going to be moving in different ways. Same with Red Dead Redemption and Skyrim, where really, I think it would be fairly impossible to go in very, very closely to another player. It's unbelievable. But then we have these games where there's almost more storytelling, where, like Bastion, where constantly there's a story being told on top of it, of the actual gameplay, or Skyward Sword, where you're kind of locked into, that this is the level, this is your way to progress through it. You have to fight these people, and then after that, you get the main story is presented through a lot of cutscenes. And they found that a lot of times the most immersion is during these cutscenes. And Final Fantasy 13, which really was really locked in. So the narrative mode is the set of methods the author of a literally word, theatrical, cinematic, or musical story uses to convey the plot. So you have, you know, so many games that are first person, and so many games that are third person. So, let me show this reference.
Now, a question we are often asked is, why on earth do you study video game immersion? And I believe that it's crucial to understand that, because if we follow the logic that good video games are immersive games, then video game publishers are going to make games they think will immerse you. And so their understanding of that shapes the kind of games we get. So we might end up with 14,000 Years of War. Because they assume that's what's going to immerse us, and they'll just keep making games along those lines.
So yeah, they really went
Proper
for
story is supposed to start at the
immersion in
beginning.
this.
Ain't so simple with this one. Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky.
So, you know, the player, as they
He
go,
gets up,
they're doing
sets
the
off for
motor
bastion,
movements,
wherever
but
we agreed to go
they're
in case of
constantly
trouble.
given the story through this narration. So yeah, it's a
Grabbing
narrative,
forms up under his
but
fingers and pointing
when you
away.
get down to it,
He don't
it's
stop
really
to wonder why.
the telling of the story.
Finds
Instead
his
of
lifelong
actual
friend
narrative.
just lying in the road.
Um,
Well, it's a touching reunion.
you know, in comparison to, let's see, well, we've all seen Skyrim, but how many of us haven't seen it? A couple. But yeah, so you know, watching videos of that, it's amazing. You know, you go scene to scene of watching. Okay, so this is what this person chose their character to look like. They decide they're going to be a mage and go to the College of Winterhold. But if you're a warrior, you're never going to go there probably, unless you want to. So that's the whole thing of giving the gamer the option of what they want to do, or the game telling you what to do, basically. So, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Okay, so while we're switching back, anybody have an immersive story, you know, like that you really got into? Yeah.
Recent game, Dead Island. I don't have a very good sound system in my home, but I've got a really sweet pair of headphones that cost a fortune. And that game is, you're constantly under threat. But the funny thing is like, even when there are not enemies around, there's environmental noises that alert you, hey, you're in danger in this environment. And I'm just sitting there, you know, throw a knife at zombie, shoot gun at zombie, and hear, and I have to spin around and look behind me looking for the
Yeah.
What's happened to me was back in 2003 when I was actually vacationing with my family. I actually sat down and played Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time for 6 hours straight. And the one thing that immersed me was the narration of the Prince character telling his story and telling the entire thing, describing it, and basically telling what's going on and everything else like that. That really immersed me into the story, and you know, I played for 6 hours.
Okay, one more and then come back, way back there. Yeah.
I definitely almost missed Christmas dinner this year because I had all my 3DS was on. It was, Haley, come on, Mom, I'm almost done with this dungeon. 2 dungeons later.